In the upcoming 2020 general election, voters in New Smyrna Beach will see 4 local items on the ballot that have a direct impact on city government. 3 involve electing a mayor and 2 commissioners to represent Zones 3 and 4. The other is a referendum on whether or not to amend New Smyrna Beach's city charter, the foundational document that defines the organization, powers, functions, and essential procedures of city government. Put another way, the Constitution is to the United States as the city charter is to New Smyrna Beach. In 2019, the City Commission formed a charter review committee made up of New Smyrna Beach citizens and hired Marilyn Crotty of the Florida Institute of Government at the University of Central Florida to facilitate.
The 10 citizens who were appointed by the City Commission to this committee met beginning in November of 2019 through May of 2020. And during this period, they reviewed the entire charter of the City of New Smyrna Beach. They debated, they discussed, they analyzed the contents of the charter, and they compared it to charters of like cities throughout the state of Florida. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the hard work of all of the members of the committee, and I want to acknowledge that Marty Danaher, who was a devoted member of the committee, unfortunately passed away in June and will not be able to see the final result of the hard work that he put into this charter review. All of the members were devoted to the city of New Smyrna Beach. Their ideas and their thoughts totally reflected on what is best for the citizens of this community. And although they did not all agree on the elements of the recommendations that were made, by the end of the process, through a consensus decision-making process, they unanimously approved the recommendations that were sent forward to the City Commission.
Following a joint meeting with the City Commission, those recommended changes were then distilled into this single 75-word ballot question. Throughout the video, we'll break it down into each of its individual elements, and I'll briefly summarize each item while showing its formal text on screen. Feel free to pause the video as much as you like during these segments to review each of the items that interest you. You'll also hear directly from former members of the Charter Review Committee, all of whom were offered the opportunity to participate in this video. First, let's tackle incorporating a preamble, which was added to the Charter as an introduction, both setting forth the rationale for the Charter and some aspirational goals for the city.
A preamble to the U.S. Constitution is something that most of us are all familiar with. So in this amended charter, the Citizen Committee wrote a preamble that sets forth the rationale for the charter and some lofty goals for the city, which you will see in more detail as you get into reading the actual charter.
The preamble is new, again, not many cities have preambles, but our committee felt very strongly about that from the get-go, that we needed to express in our city charter the aspirations that our citizens have. How else can a governing body know what direction to take? It was really kind of cool, if you will, that one of our members asked for that at the very first meeting, because we all bought into it immediately as being our North Star, if you will. It was the language that we all thought through together and endorsed unanimously. And then what followed in the charter followed that preamble.
The preamble was added to the charter, which may well reflect what the whole city has in mind in terms of its mission, vision, and its future. But this way we've put something in writing that the commission can consider and edit as needed and put forward to the community to see if we've captured it accurately. So our sense there was that we would have services that are provided to meet the needs of the population in an efficient manner, and that we would also involve accountability and transparency in the planning process and participation of the community in the events of this city. So I think that captures at a 30,000 foot level the preamble that was added.
The preamble was kind of important to me. That was the very first thing that we wanted to do to kind of guide us in all of the other actions that we were making.
Yeah. So I think it's the voice of the community, right? So it's all of those things that we want as part of our city, and it became the beacon, I would say, for our committee as we started writing and rewriting the charter. We would always go back to that as kind of the foundational purpose that we were there for, and so it really helped.
Here is the complete text of the new preamble. Again, feel free to pause here for review before moving on. Next, let's look at both reorganizing existing language and removing obsolete language together.
So when I first started looking through the charter and trying to make sense of it was kind of out of order. It was really a lot of legalese that I was like, this makes no sense to me.
There's a couple of foundational things that might seem small, but I find interest in the details. So just a complete restructuring of the charter, I think, is really important, because coming into this new and green, I had never read a city charter. So my homework when I got started on the committee was to go find our city charter and read it. Not the sexiest document to read.
When I heard that the chamber had not been reviewed in quite some years, I said, maybe I should review it. And I took a look at it and thought, wow, this is not user-friendly. And I was really excited to put out a product that was something that the citizens could really use and the residents could look at and understand, and without a law degree.
It was hard to navigate, hard to digest. So I think the work that we did to really restructure it and rewrite it in a way that our citizens will be able to absorb and really understand, I think, is important. Again, might be a small detail, but I love the small details.
The proposed charter has been reorganized, renumbered, and reformatted for consistency and ease of understanding. As an example of reorganizing existing language, here we see that the charter's 15 current chapters would now be condensed and reorganized into 9 new articles. Examples of removing obsolete language include making language gender neutral throughout the charter. Of note, after reviewing the committee's final report, the City Commission submitted some language changes of their own, which you see summarized here in these bullet points. Next, let's look at revising election procedures.
There's no change made to the form of government or the city manager form that is currently in place. The governing body will not change. The current 5 members stay in place, as well as the mayor elected at large and the 4 zone commissioners. The terms of office, 4 years for commissioners and 2 years for the mayor, do not change. It simplifies the process for future elections of your officials in the city, bringing them into compliance with state law and modeling what most of the other cities in Volusia County already do.
Within the proposed article on elections are these 7 sections. Let's summarize them one by one. They declare that city elections are nonpartisan, as is already the current practice. Now it's simply in writing in the charter. They require the city to follow state of Florida election laws. They change the city's current Board of Elections into the Canvassing Board, which only includes members of the City Commission whose names do not appear on the ballot. They state when primary elections are unnecessary and what happens in the event of a tie vote. They change when a term of office begins from the 7th day after an election to the first Tuesday after certification of the election to avoid any problem with contested elections. And they add criteria for the drawing of zones and procedures for their adoption. Next, let's look at revising qualifications and duties of members of the City Commission and charter officers. This element involves items in both Articles 2 and 4, so let's split them up and take them one at a time.
So second, in my mind, was the strategic planning. That's clearly a function that the city has been conducting all along. But this way we have made some minor modifications to it to perhaps make it slightly more successful in the future. And in this case, we'd see the strategic plan under powers and duties of the commission itself. And the commission might be seen as a great sailing team that is ready to set sail, but they might need minor adjustments to the sails to move the ship in the direction that they want. So what we have with the strategic plan is to include the implementation section that requires that there is planning for how this plan will be implemented specifically. As we know from implementation science, without the plan, it's not going to happen if we don't have it connected well. In the process of that strategic planning, we're able to set short and long-term goals and include the public in the activities of that planning. So next is leadership. Clearly, we elect our leaders to the commissioner roles and the mayor's role, and we have the city manager in place. That leadership team is really critical to moving forward the plan and making adjustments as needed. A part of this then focuses on two different groups. So one thing that we added was related to the mayor's role. And the mayor, and we'll recall this past year, is now going to be in a role to present a State of the City address on an annual basis in a setting that allows for public participation. I think that's really important so that we can all get short and long-term updates on what's going on with the plan, where are we in the progress on the plan, and perhaps provide some feedback as a part of our continuing participation.
Within Article 2 are these sections that handle how the City Commission operates. Now, covering everything in this article could easily be an entirely separate video on its own, so we're only going to highlight the major changes that you'll be voting on. This section now states that the City Commission has all powers except those prohibited by the state constitution, the Volusia County Charter, or the City Charter. It adds a requirement for annual performance reviews of the city's charter officers. It also mentions conducting an annual strategic planning process every year, though this is already the current practice. Again, the difference is now it's in writing. Currently, you need to be a resident for 6 months before running for political office in New Smyrna Beach. If these charter amendments are approved, that residency requirement to qualify for the City Commission would increase to 1 year. This is a new section that places further prohibitions and other restrictions on city commissioners, including that they may not hold other office and that they may not hold a compensated appointment or employment with the city until 1 year after they've left office. Commissioners may not attempt to control the appointment or removal of city staff under the authority of the city manager. Commissioners may not interfere in the day-to-day operations controlled by the city manager, the city attorney, or the city clerk. This section expands the grounds for forfeiture of office to include residency requirements, violation of the charter, and conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude. It also decreases the number of unexcused absences allowed from City Commission meetings from 4 to 3. This section adds election and forfeiture to the responsibility the City Commission has to judge the qualifications of its members. In addition, it lays out a detailed procedure to be followed if forfeiture of one of its members is under consideration. This section covers how vacancies are filled on the City Commission. This section authorizes the City Commission to request investigations into the affairs of the city and the conduct of any departments. This section requires determination of annual compensation of elected officials by ordinance. Again, another example of an item that is current practice. That's also the case for this section, which points out that a simple majority of 3 of 5 commissioners is required to pass legislation. And finally, Mayor Russ Owen gave the city's first State of the City address earlier this year in the Brannan Center. This addition would now make it a requirement for him and all future mayors to do so every year.
That leadership role also engages the city mayor, city manager, in his role, both in helping the commission with that strategic plan and the implementation plans and the long-term goals. A couple of reasons for that. The city manager has a direct connection with the budget, and if we're going to implement these plans, we certainly need to keep in mind the budget. That can be part of the city manager's role in helping plan the implementation. In addition, the city manager has some sense of long-term goals for the city in general and can help to adjust some of those perhaps conflicts or disparate goals and help us be aware of how to balance those best for the city.
Within Article 4 are the following sections that deal with the city's 3 charter officers, listed here. They clarify that there are 3 charter officers in the city, a city manager, city attorney, and city clerk, and specify their appointment and removal by majority vote of the entire city commission, as is current practice. They require appointment of a city manager be made on the basis of education and experience, and require them to live within the city unless otherwise approved by the city commission. They clarify the duties of the city attorney and add requirements that they be a member in good standing with the Florida Bar and have experience in local government law. Finally, it adds the city clerk to the charter with a description of their duties. Next, let's take a look at adopting provisions related to sustainability, which adds a new article that deals with environmental stewardship, zoning goals, historic preservation, and the sale of city land and structures.
An important addition to the revised charter is some environmental, zoning, and historic preservation requirements. All of these can be found in the new section that's entitled Sustainability.
Of course, my pet chapter is Chapter 6, because it does speak to the sustainability of our city going forward. And very few people today challenge the fact that we do have rising seas. And we've seen in our city places that have flooded, that have never flooded in anyone's lifetime or knowledge thereof. We have to think of the future and what challenges we could have and try to offset those with really smart government. And so the sustainability chapter is new, and it does focus on these challenges for our future. And although it doesn't give detailed instructions on how to do that, it does suggest to all commissions that they need to pay attention to that.
These are some things that we knew that the residents wanted. We knew from going out in the community, I mean, it wasn't just our personal feelings, even though many of us got behind that part of the charter. I think most of us, I don't want to say all, but we all were very like, yeah, this needs to be in there. And we wanted the charter to be resident-centered, and because that's who's living here. And so we knew that the residents wanted things about environmental stewardship and historic preservation and zoning goals that were in line with what the residents wanted. So those were the kinds of things that we felt were going to protect what makes New Smyrna unique and special, not just to the residents, but also to the visitors that come back year after year. So we really, that section stood out to me about protecting New Smyrna's kind of way of life and all of the things that we really love about New Smyrna.
Well, certainly the sustainability article that was new that we added, I really felt was really important. That was brought forward by one of our committee members and really embraced by everybody on the committee. My husband and I, we moved to New Smyrna because of the historic and coastal charm. And if we don't learn to manage our resources and sustain them, then we're not going to be able to continue to grow and manage the infrastructure that's needed to keep our city charming the way the way that we love it.
The charm for me of New Smyrna Beach is that over its 250, 1 or 2 year history now, we have preserved so many structures through those centuries, through those decades. And so we have an eclectic architecture, which we don't want to see submerged by any kind of cookie cutter design standards. It's wonderful when people are innovative. The problem does occur, however, and it's happened on a couple of our very narrow historic streets, where structures, sometimes homes and sometimes other buildings, commercial buildings, go up that tower over all the others. And so they distract and diminish all that we have acquired over these centuries. And so, although I would never want to dictate how someone should build his or her house in a neighborhood, I think we can expect it not to be the Taj Mahal, but something that is consistent with the scale of that neighborhood.
These are the 4 sections of the new sustainability article. Environmental stewardship calls for standards related to tree protection, stormwater quality, floodplain management, the use of impervious materials, and removal of septic tanks. Land development and zoning deals with preserving the scale and character of the city's neighborhoods, maintaining tree canopy, green areas, and historic footprint, and doing so without endangering public health, safety, or welfare. Historic preservation calls for ordinances that update regulations pertaining to historic properties, create and expand upon local historic districts, and assist historic property owners in obtaining tax exemptions and grants. Next, let's take a look at including limitations on the transfer of ownership or lease of certain lands. This is a reference to Section 4 of the new sustainability article, shown here, which would make it more difficult for city commissioners to sell, lease, trade, or gift significant waterfront public lands or structures. As an example, this is a map showing the North Causeway boat ramps and their parking lots. Because it lies contiguous to a named body of water, the City Commission wouldn't be able to sell or lease it for more than 10 years with a simple majority of 3 commissioners, as is the case now. Instead, all 5 commissioners would now have to unanimously agree to do so before moving forward. Next, let's take a look at establishing requirements for financial management, another new article in the proposed charter that deals with fiscal matters.
There's a keen desire on the part of citizens to know what's going on financially. And we have had independent audits, but that was never really required in the charter. And remember, the charter's the top dog here. If it's not there, then commissioners aren't really bound to do it. They can change the comp plan. Having it in an ordinance is not the same as the citizens voting on it and putting it in their constitution, which only they can change. So it was important to have in the charter that independent audits and how the auditor had to remain independent be spelled out in the charter.
Here are the sections of the new financial management article. They identify the fiscal year as running from September through October as required by state law, set a no later than date of August 1st for the city manager to submit a budget and budget message to the city commission. They describe what should be included in the budget message and describe what should be included in the budget. They require the city commission to pass an ordinance providing for administration and oversight of the budget, and require an annual audit setting forth standards and requiring competitive bidding for the selection of an auditor who shall serve no longer than 5 years and prohibits the auditor from providing the city any other services. Next, let's take a look at providing for citizen participation, which creates a new article that includes advisory boards, charter amendments, charter review, recall, and initiative and citizen referendums.
There's further empowerment of the citizens of New Smyrna Beach through 2 actual processes that are added to the charter. One is the initiative and the other is the referendum. This would allow citizens to propose ordinances and also allow citizens to propose the repeal of ordinances that have been passed by the City Commission. All of these again would go to a vote of the citizens if indeed they complete the process. It also provides for regular periodic review of the charter as was done this past year.
We want to be sure that we are collaborating with the proper parties. So we have several different parties. We've already mentioned the public being involved in city affairs. And one good example of that is clearly the commission. The committees are assigned by the commission, and those committees, like the Charter Review Committee, are able to provide some feedback and in their review make some recommendations.
So we already have wonderful residents, we all know that, but when you looked at the previous charter, it was confusing really about how to become involved in certain ways or get changes made the way that you wanted. And so we added that article on citizen participation because we wanted to encourage citizens to be involved in what's going on in the city and understand how to make changes if they feel there's a change that needs to be made, or it's a lot more clear. I think we hear a lot about transparency, and I think that the articles and that we added, especially on citizen participation, are making it more transparent for citizens to be involved. The charter had not been reviewed in decades, we'll say, many decades. So typically we would review it every 10 years. And so we added in section 6.03 for the charter to be reviewed actually in 5 years. And we felt that was important because we made so many huge changes, not just the reorganization, not just adding those sections I've spoken about previously. It was, we really wanted this to become something that's usable. So we got it into the modern era. We made all these huge changes. We added a bunch of stuff that we felt was important. And then we feel like there are tweaks that need to be made. But it's kind of like when you move into a new house, you need to wait for a little bit, live in it a little bit, see where you need to move this armchair or that buffet to make it function a little better for you. So we felt after 5 years, that would be a good time after we've lived in it for 5 years and see how it's working and go in and make those little tweaks and changes that need to be made. So that's why we added that. So now there is a provision in there that says in 5 years, it needs to be looking at it again, make those tweaks, and then at that time we assume they'll change it to every 10 years. Because at that point it'll just be perfect, I think.
Yeah.
I hope.
These are the sections of the new citizen participation article. They describe the nature of advisory boards, allow for amending the charter according to state law, require a review of the charter in 2026, 5 years' time, and then every 10 years after that, ensuring representation across all of the city's 4 zones. They identify how elected officials may be recalled according to state law, and provide a process for the adoption of ordinances by a vote of the electorate and for the reconsideration of adopted ordinances by a vote of the electorate. This segues nicely into the next element, including an initiative and referendum process. Within section 7.05, there are 6 subsections describing the requirements and procedures for initiatives and referendums. For example, item 1 of subsection 7.05b states that petitions must be signed by at least 10% of the total number of registered voters at the last regular city election. The charter text in Ordinance 77 TAC 20, which is linked under the supporting documents section below, goes into great detail on this process, starting on page 24. So if you're interested in how the initiative and referendum process would work, I strongly encourage you to click on that link and give it a read. Finally, the last element we see here is requiring regular reviews of the charter, which we already covered under section 7.03, which requires another review of the city charter by an advisory committee in 2026 and then every 10 years after that. We're going to wrap up this video here, but keep in mind that its intent is to give you the general, overall flavor for this ballot item. If you'd like to dive deeper and look at the current city charter alongside the newly proposed language in its entirety, I'll again refer you to Ordinance 77 TAC 20 and the other supporting documents linked with this video on our city website at www.cityofnsb.com. Thanks for your time, New Smyrna Beach. We want as many voters as possible to be familiar with this item before sending in their mail-in ballot or stepping into the ballot box on November 3rd. So please share this video and talk about it with your friends, family, and neighbors who vote here in New Smyrna Beach. We'll end the video with a few parting shots from our Charter Review Committee members.
I was so happy to be asked by Commissioner Colodi to serve, because for a very long time, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, of delving more than I had in past years into what was happening in our town, how we were growing and changing, and that inevitably took me to our city charter. And I found it to be mind-boggling as to the absence of so much in the charter and disclaimers as to Florida statutes now covering, and I just had a very strong feeling that the charter needed to be reviewed. Through the years, of course, different chapters have been amended in various ways, and the people have voted on one amendment. But honestly, I don't think that this charter as a document has been reviewed in 30 to 40 years. And I'll tell you why I say that. There, Chapter 5 is all about municipal courts and the municipal judge. The municipal courts were abolished in 1977. Now, there is the disclaimer, of course, that, don't pay any attention to this, basically. But it's redundant and it's confusing. And this is the citizens' constitution. And they need to be able to read it easily and to understand it easily. So I've had a passion, really, for getting this whole charter reviewed, and I was not alone, obviously. Our city commission should all be given gold stars for doing this. It's been a long time. Initially, I think we all were quite raw, and Marilyn Crotty was the pro, and at the end of the day, we all applauded Marilyn. She was so patient with us and understanding of our individual biases, if you will, and was able to lead us in ways that we worked around and found consensus. She strongly urged us to have a consensus rather than a vote on issues. And I was skeptical of that, I have to say, and others were. In fact, we agreed as a group to have a minority opinion filing. At the end of the day, again, no one, to my knowledge, filed in a minority opinion. So her strategy, I think, was very productive of coming to an agreement. And I'm sure that not everyone, including me, is happy with every word and everything that was done. But no harm was ever done to any part of our current charter. And it is enormously better than our current charter. It is truly a citizen's charter now. I'm just so proud of the committee and how we worked together toward a common goal that was needed and is fair. And I think everyone on the committee would agree with that.
Well, I found that it was very important to participate in that activity. As a person who has some urban services background, I thought it important to be able to share some of that expertise with the city and be able to give back to the city that I love. being in that group was quite a good experience for me. A variety of folks from different walks of life, which is always the good activity to be involved in, and recognizing clearly that it typically takes a wide variety of perspectives to solve any kind of issues. So having a variety of perspectives on that charter review was very helpful.
I was really interested in contributing in some way to the city and wanted to do some volunteer work. Mayor Russ Owen reached out to me and told me about the opportunity on the charter committee. I thought, I've never been involved in municipal government, but it sounded like a really interesting opportunity. So it was really nice to be able to contribute in such a meaningful way to the city. Such a committed group, really passionate about their city and wanting to make it better. We were all united. I mean, it was such a diverse group, but we were all united by our passion for just that, just making the city great and keeping it great. It was very structured, but yet very collaborative, so I really enjoyed that. Pure professionalism. Everybody appreciated everybody's comments, and they were all courteous and kind as we went through the process of, kind of rebutting people's comments and things like that. We had the most amazing facilitator. I can't say.
Marilyn Crowdy?
Yes, Marilyn was amazing. So I think she kept us really focused and really helped us to get through the whole process, because we could definitely run off on tangents, but she was fabulous.
It's important that you remember that the election will be held on November 3rd. If you're not registered to vote currently, you still have time until October 5th to register with the Supervisor of Elections in Volusia County. You can vote by mail, you can do early voting, or you can vote in person on Election Day. If you have not requested a mail ballot, there's still time to do that, and it is suggested that you mail in your ballot 2 to 3 weeks prior to November 3rd to assure that it is received in time by the Supervisor of Elections. If you do early voting, that will begin sometime towards the end of October, and of course Election Day will be November 3rd. I suggest you look at the Supervisor of Elections website for further information on all of these voting requirements. I want to let you know also that you will be looking at a very long ballot in November. In addition to the federal offices, state offices, and county offices, you'll have your city municipal elections, and you will have 6 state constitutional amendments on the ballot for you to consider. The last thing on your ballot will be the charter review for the charter amendment for the city of New Smyrna Beach. It'll be one question. If you vote yes, all of the changes that are recommended will go into effect. If you vote no, you will still have the same charter that you currently have with the city of New Smyrna Beach. So I encourage you to vote. I encourage you to study what you'll be voting on, and I wish you well in the future.